Labas rytas, gerbėmieji svečiai. Labai malonu Jūs matyti šiandien mūsų konferencijoje. Tikiuosi, kad diskusijos, kurias mes šiandien turėsime, tikrai bus ir įdomios, ir naudingos. Jeigu kažkas naudojasi sinchroninio vertimo įranga, tai nulinis kanalas yra lietuvių kalba, vienas yra anglų. Good morning, dear guests. It's my pleasure to meet you, to greet you. I hope our today's discussions will be both interesting and encouraging, maybe for some changes, maybe challenging. We have today the translation, so part of the guests will speak Lithuanian, part will speak English. So for Lithuanian, it's a 0 channel, for English is channel 1. We have my colleague Dainius who will help anyone who needs such help. So our conference has 3 sessions, but of course, as it usually starts, we'll start with the greeting words. And our greeting words today will be directed to all of you by our Vice Rector, Professor Saulius Spurga, by Ms. Henryka Mościcka-Dendys, who is the head of the Foreign Service and Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland, and Dainius Babilas, who is the Director of the Department of National Minorities under the Government of the Republic of Lithuania. After the greetings, we will move to the first session without a break. We will just change the names on the table. Anyone needs any help, you are more than welcome to ask me, Katarzyna, or Aleksandra, and we will help you. So let's have a great conference. Professor, the floor is yours.
Gerbiami konferencijos dalyviai, mėly kolegos, mėly svečiai, visų pirma, noriu pasveikinti Mykolo universiteto bendruomenės vardu atvykusius į šią konferenciją ir tikrai ta tema geriausios Europos patirtys tautinių mažumų apsaugos srityje tikrai yra įkvepianti ir noriu padėkoti visiems organizatoriams šios konferencijos. Mykolo Riomerio universitetas buvo pirmasis universitetas, tiesa, tuo metu kitų pavadinimų, kuris buvo įkurtas atkūrus Lietuvos nepriklausomybę ir dalyvavo aktyviai visuose procesuose, kuriantis valstybei ir prisidėjo prie visų procesų, prie integracijos ir mažumų ir įvairių visuomenės grupių, nes tai yra visų pirma socialinių mokslų universitetas, o kaip žinia, sovietų laikais kaip tik socialiniai mokslai labiausiai nukentėjo, jų kaip tokių iš vis turbūt Sovietų Sąjungoje moksliniais faktais ir mokslinė metodologijom pagrįstų gal ir iš vis nebuvo. Taigi teko tas uždavinys ir šiuo metu tikrai galime didžiuotis, kad jau 55 000 alumnų dirba valstybės tarnyboje, viešajame sektorije ir privačiame sektorije. Universiteto mokslininkai ir šioje tautinių mažumų srityje įneša savo indėlį, tai visų pirma socialinių klausimų laboratorijų tinkle žmogaus teisių laboratorija, taip pat teisės mokyklos mokslininkai ir magistrai įneša savo indėlį. Jeigu grįžtant prie tautinių mažumų, tai žinoma, gal verta pažymėti ir tai, kad ir pats kažkada aš dirbau šitoj srity, tai tikrai labai buvo seniai, bet kaip tik sąjūdžio tautinių santykių grupėje ir nacionalinių klausimų komisijoje dirbau net ir kaip etatinis darbuotojas, teko artimai bendradarbiauti su pirmąja tautinių mažumų departamento direktorė, vėliau ambasadorė Halina Kobeckaitė, rašyti šiais klausimais. Keletas įdomių tokių faktų. Lietuvos tautinių mažumų įstatymas buvo priimtas 1989 metais, taigi dar sovietinėje Lietuvoje, ir jis buvo vienas iš pirmųjų regione. Žinoma, sovietinėje Lietuvoje, tai čia ne viskas pasakyta, nuo 88 metų ir 89 metais, ta, ką mes dabar vadintume politinė darbotvarkė, buvo padiktuota, žinoma, sąjūdžio, kuris yra mūsų nacionalinio išsivadavimo judėjimas. Taip pat ir pilietybės įstatymas buvo priimtas 89 metais, kuris irgi turbūt yra pavyzdinis įstatymas, nes jisai nenumatė jokių reikalavimų piliečiams pasirinkti pilietybę gyvenantiems Lietuvoje, tuo metu gyvenantiems Lietuvoje, įskaitant ir tautinės mažumas, nebuvo jokių reikalavimų ir absoliuti dauguma tapo piliečiais. Taip pat reikia suprasti, kokie laikai buvo tuo metu. 89-90 metai. Šiaip net ir Europoje dar nebuvo tokių dokumentų ir tik tai 92 metais buvo Europos tarybos patvirtinta regionų arba tautinių mažumų kalbų chartija ir 94 metais pasirašyta Europos tarybos tautinių mažumų apsaugos pagrindų konvencija. Sakoma, kad Lietuvos tautinių mažumų įstatymas tapo taip pat netgi ir pavyzdžių, rengiant šiuos dokumentus. Atidarytas pasirašymui dokumentas, tai yra tautinių mažumų apsaugos pagrindų chartija, buvo 91 vasario 1 dieną ir kaip tik tą dieną Lietuva šį dokumentą ir pasirašė. Taigi buvo kartu su pačiom pirmojom valstybėm, kuri šį dokumentą patvirtino ir pasirašė. Taigi tokia yra istorija, žinoma, laikas eina, praėjo jau labai nemažai metų ir universitetas jau švenčia 36 gimtadienį, taip kad tos problemos keičiasi, problemos kyla, kaip sakau, universiteto mokslininkai įneša savo indėlį ir džiugu, kad šiandien bus proga sistemiškai apžvelgti gerasias praktikas šioje srityje. Taigi, ačiū Jums ir linkiu geros konferencijos.
Thank you very much. If I can now invite Ms. Henryka Mościcka-Dendys.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Rector, distinguished ministers, excellencies, members of parliament, representatives of international organizations, esteemed scholars, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, drodzy przyjaciele. It's always a great privilege to be back in Vilnius, and today it's my particular honor and privilege to welcome you to a conference devoted to the best practices of protection of national minorities in Europe. I would like to thank all of you for your presence and for the commitment you show to this very particular topic. Occasions such as this one bring together very different perspectives, expertises and areas of expertise. Researchers contribute knowledge and evidence. Civil servants bring practical policy-making experience, and political leaders provide the vision and the determination necessary to translate principles into action. It is through this dialogue that we can better understand both the challenges and opportunities connected to the protection of national minorities in contemporary Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, when discussing this subject, it's impossible to ignore history. The history of ethnically based violence in Europe throughout the 20th century serves as a stark and sobering reminder of the consequences of intolerance, and exclusion and systemic discrimination. Across our continent, entire communities experienced forced displacement, cultural suppression, political marginalization, and persecution. Ethnic and religious differences were too often manipulated by political actors seeking power, while extremist ideologies transformed diversity into a pretext for division and for violence. The consequences were devastating. Millions of people lost not only their homes and livelihood, but also their ability to preserve and pass on their languages, traditions, and cultural heritage. The tragic events of the 20th century led to extremely dramatic developments, including mass crimes committed against entire ethnic groups. Minority communities frequently became the first victims of political instability and social unrest. Instead of being regarded as an integral part of a society, they were often portrayed as outsiders, dangerous to the cultural integrity of the nation state, despite having lived for generations in the very same places as the majority populations. The legacy of those historical experiences continues to influence contemporary Europe. They remind us that peace, stability, and democracy cannot be taken for granted, and that they require a constant vigilance, strong institutions, and a shared commitment to human dignity. It was during the turbulent years of the Second World War that a famous Polish lawyer, Mr. Rafał Lemkin, who is of Jewish origin, introduced the term genocide to describe crimes aimed at the destruction of entire national, ethnic, racial, or religious groups. Lemkin understood that the existing legal lexicon was insufficient to capture the scale and nature of those atrocities. His intellectual and moral contribution helped shape the post-war international legal order and ultimately led to the adoption of the Genocide Convention. Since the second half of the 20th century, Europe and the broader international community have made remarkable progress in the protection of national minorities and in the way diversity is understood within our societies. Following the devastation of the Second World War, European states gradually developed a new framework based on human rights, equality before law, respect for cultural diversity, and the conviction emerged that minority rights are not privileges granted to selected group, but rather an essential component of democratic governance and social cohesion. This transformation has been reflected in numerous instruments and political commitments. The Rector already referred to some of them. Particularly important has been the work of the Council of Europe and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, meaning the OSCE. The Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities established important standards concerning equality, cultural preservation, education, language rights, and participation in public life that all signatories agreed to follow. Various OSCE recommendations and guidelines have further strengthened international understanding of the best practices in minority protection. At the national level, many European countries have incorporated these principles into legislation, constitutional provisions, and not least public policies. Educational systems increasingly acknowledge cultural diversity. Minority languages enjoy greater legal recognition than in previous generations. Mechanisms for political participation and consultation have expanded. Public institutions have become more aware of the need to allow for the diverse identities to be present in modern European societies, to express themselves in their own unique ways. There are still regions, ladies and gentlemen, where minority communities continue to face social exclusion, economic disparities, barriers to participation, or difficulties in preserving their linguistic or cultural heritage. New forms of polarization, disinformation, hybrid threats, political radicalization can also create tensions and undermine trust. Yet it is important to recognize how far we have come as today. The dominant perspective in Europe differs fundamentally from that of a century ago. Increasingly, we understand that diversity is not a threat. On the contrary, it can strengthen societies by enriching cultural life, broadening perspectives, fostering creativity, and enhancing mutual understanding. More and more Europeans recognize that the histories of majority and minority communities are deeply intertwined. They shape the same towns and cities, contribute to the same economies, defend the same country, and participate in the same political and cultural life. Their stories are not separate narratives, but they form a shared history. The shift in perspective is perhaps one of the most significant achievements of today's Europe. We are gradually moving away from the notion that identities must compete with one another. Instead, we increasingly acknowledge that multiple identities can coexist peacefully. One can belong to a national minority while at the same time being a fully engaged and loyal citizen of the state in which one lives and uses all the opportunities to become successful and a recognized member of societies, regardless of one's origin. Such an understanding strengthens democracy, encourages participation, and fosters trust and dialogue. For this reason, our task today is not merely to preserve existing achievements, but to build upon them. We must continue to support research that improves our understanding of minority issues. We must ensure that public policies remain evidence-based and responsive to changing realities. We must strengthen educational initiatives that promote historical awareness and intercultural dialogue. We must ensure that binding conventions and international treaties on the matters concerning national minorities are being observed. The participation of scholars, policymakers, public administrators, and representatives of minority communities is indispensable in this very effort. No single institution possesses all the answers. Progress requires cooperation across disciplines, across sectors, and across borders. According to our estimates, ladies and gentlemen, more than 15 million Polish people or descendants of Poles live outside today's Poland. They are loyal citizens of the countries they currently reside, contributing to their economic and social development, bringing added value to the vitality of their local communities. However, at the same time, they remain committed to their Polish roots, to the language, culture, and tradition they cherish and want to transmit to their children. After the end of the Cold War and the dissolving of the Soviet Union, the Republic of Poland obtained its full sovereignty. That was a time to start a new policy also domestically towards Poles living abroad. Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs started to negotiate new treaties with countries of Central and Eastern Europe as well as of Asia. It was important to us that these treaties included provisions on the rights of national minorities, especially in the field of education, culture, and heritage protection, such as protection of cemeteries. Most of these treaties were concluded during the 1990s and celebrate their 35th or 36th anniversary this year. Poland, fully aware of the necessity to uphold the rights of Polish minorities residing abroad, has also undertaken measures to ensure that Polish citizens of different national backgrounds, whose families have inhabited the present-day territory of Poland for generations, are equipped with appropriate legal measures enabling the effective exercise of their powers. We integrated international standards as set out in the Framework Convention on the protection of national minorities into the very fabric of our administrative, educational, and electoral law. To guarantee all citizens the opportunity to preserve and foster their culture, traditions, and language, we have adopted the Act on National and Ethnic Minorities and on the Regional Language. This legislation provides a comprehensive framework of protections, including education in minority languages, bilingual designation of topographic features, the use of minority languages as an auxiliary language before municipal authorities, as well as the possibility of retaining the original spelling of given names and surnames. Ladies and gentlemen, Poland and Europe's experience demonstrates both the dangers of exclusions and the benefits of inclusion. Our history teaches us that what can happen when prejudice and intolerance prevail. At the same time, our progress demonstrates what can be achieved when societies choose the path of dialogue and cooperation. Let us continue working together to ensure that every individual, independent of where he or she is living, regardless of ethnic origin, language, or cultural background, can participate fully in the social life and in society while preserving their unique identity. By doing so, we strengthen not only minority communities, but also our democracies, our resilience to external threats, which is of particular importance in today's Europe, and we share our joint European future. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very good conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we continue with our greetings, and I would like to invite Dainius Babilas, the Director of the Department of National Minorities.
Gerbiamas ambasadoriau, gerbiamas vicerektoriau, gerbiami konferencijos dalyviai, gerbiami svečiai iš Lietuvos ir iš užsienio, mėly kolegos, mėly pažįstami. Nuoširdžiai dėkoju visų pirma Lenkijos Respublikos ambasadai Vilniuje, Mykolo Romerio universitetui, Vidurio Europos institutui už bendrą šios konferencijos formatą ir kvietimą, į kurį mes galėjome atsiliepti ir įsitraukti. Taip pat atskirai noriu padėkoti Lenkijos Respublikos ambasados Vilniuje vadovui laikinajam reikalų patikėtiniui Andžiui Dudzinskiui už šios konferencijos idėją ir aktyvų įsitraukimą stiprinant tarptautinį dialogą Vilniuje. Ačiū Jums labai. Džiaugiuosi, kad Tautinių mažumų departamentas prie Lietuvos Respublikos vyriausybės yra šio renginio partneris, o šiandien čia susitinka akademinė bendruomenė, valstybės institucijos ir bendruomenės, kurios kasdien kuria Lietuvos, o to pačiu ir visos Europos socialinį ir ypač sociokultūrinį audinį. Ši konferencija reikšmingai tarsi ir simboliškai pratęsia Lietuvos tautinių bendrijų dienai, kasmet minimai gegužės 21-ąją skirtų renginių ciklą. UNESCO kvietimu ši diena pasaulyje minima kaip diena skirta kultūriniai įvairoviai, kuri padeda dialogui ir darniai pažangai. Tuo pačiu tai kvietimas nuolat žvelgti į Lietuvos patirtį integracijos ir įtraukties srityje ne uždarai, o platesnėme Europos geopolitikos ir šiandieninių iššūkių kontekste. Šiemet taip pat esame kviečiami minėti Lietuvos tautinių bendrijų metus, nes lygiai prieš 100 metų, 1926-aisiais, į Seimo valdančiąją koaliciją pirmą kartą įsitraukė tautinės mažumos. Šią savaitę Vilniuje vyksta ir pasaulinis gailestingumo kongresas, suburiantis dalyvius iš įvairių pasaulio šalių. Ir tai vėlgi simboliška, kad tuo pačiu metu mūsų mieste kalbame apie svarbias vertybės – pagarbą žmogaus orumui, kultūriniam savitumui ir gebėjimui kurti dialogą tarp skirtingų bendruomenių. Susiformavus šiuolaikiniams nacionalinėms valstybėms, tautinių mažumų klausimai tapo svarbia Europos politinės ir socialinės raidos dalimi. 20-ame amžiuje, kaip žinia, jūs puikiai žinote, buvo kuriamos pilietinės sistemos, formuojama kalbos politika, buvo per visą amžių ieškoma būdų, kaip suderinti nacionalinės valstybės stiprinimą ir kultūrinės įvairovės išsaugojimą. Praėjusio amžiaus pabaigoje Europoje sustiprėjo žmogaus teisių apsaugos standartai, buvo įtvirtinti nediskriminavimo principai, o tautinių mažumų teisės vis dažniau pradėtos vertinti kaip neatsiejama demokratinės valstybės dalis. ilgą laiką dėmesys buvo skiriamas apsaugai, teisių užtikrinimui, diskriminacijos prevencijai, kultūrinės ir kalbinės tapatybės išsaugojimui, šis pagrindas išlieka būtinas ir šiandien, jis yra fundamentalus. Tačiau šiuolaikinėje Europoje vis aiškiau matome, kad vien teisinio reguliavimo neužtenka. Tautinių mažumų politika šiandien apima kur kas platesnius horizontus – švietimą, kultūrą, pilietinį dalyvavimą, regioninę politiką, socialinę sanglaudą, visuomenės atsparumą ir šitą sąrašą dar galėčiau gerokai ilgiau tęsti. Todėl kalbėdami apie tautinių mažumų politiką kalbame ne tik apie konkrečias teisės ar institucijas, kalbame apie tai, kaip mes kuriame pasitikėjimą tarp žmonių, kaip stipriname visuomenės sanglaudą ir kaip užtikriname, kad kiekvienas žmogus jaustųsi visavertę valstybės ir visuomenės dalimi. Šiame kontekste yra svarbu pabrėžti vieną esminę nuostatą. Tautinėms mažumoms priklausantis asmenys nėra iššūkis šiuolaikinėms visuomenėms. Ji yra neatsiejama jų istorijos, kultūros, ekonominio ir visuomeninio gyvenimo dalis. Tautinių mažumų integracija ir įtrauktis nėra problema, tai yra galimybė. Europos valstybių patirtis, kuri mums be galo visada yra įdomi ir šiandieną labai džiaugiamės, kad galėsime jos dar daugiau pažinti, rodo, kad ten, kur mažumų teisės užtikrinamos nuosekliai ir kompleksiškai, stiprėja ne tik individualių teisių apsauga, bet ir bendras pasitikėjimas valstybė bei demokratinėmis institucijomis. Tai leidžia aiškiai matyti, kad mažumų politika nėra atskiras segmentas ar sektorius, jis yra horizontalus valstybės politikos principas, veikiantis per kultūrą, švietimą, regioninę politiką, viešąjį administravimą. Lietuva per pastaruosius dešimtmečius nuosekliai stiprina pilietinės visuomenės modelį, kuriame tautinių mažumų politika grindžiama dialogu, bendradarbiavimu ir instituciniu stabilumu, kartu siekiant suderinti valstybės kalbos politiką, žmogaus teisų standartus ir bendruomenių dalyvavimą viešajame visuomenės gyvenime. Šios krypties ištakos siekia patį nepriklausomybės atkūrimo laikotarpį, kaip ir vicerektorius minėjo ir labai puikiai prisiminė tą laiką, kai Lietuva pasirinko pilietinės valstybės principą ir suteikė pilietybę visiems nuolatiniams gyventojams, nepriklausomai nuo jų tautybės. Tai buvo svarbus politinis sprendimas ir apsisprendimas, kuris padėjo reikšmingą pagrindą įtraukios valstybės raidai ir ilgalaikiai socialiniai sanglaudai. Piliečių priklausančių tautinėms bendrijoms teisė puoselėti savo kalbą, kultūrą ir papročius buvo įtvirtinta Lietuvos konstitucijoje, kaip ir tautinėms bendrijoms teikiama parama, valstybės parama. Tautinių mažumų teisų apsaugos teisiniai pagrindai Lietuvoje pradėti formuoti iš tiesų seniai, dar atkuriant nepriklausomybę. 1989 metais buvo priimtas pirmasis tautinių mažumų įstatymas, kuris tuo metu laikytas vienu pažangiausių regione. 1991 metais jis buvo papildytas ir pritaikytas jau nepriklausomos Lietuvos teisiniai sistemai. Svarbus etapas buvo ir 2000 metais, kai Lietuva ratifikavo Europos tarybos tautinių mažumų apsaugos pagrindų konvenciją. Šis dokumentas iki šiol lieka mums svarbiausių tarptautinių mažumų teisų apsaugos instrumentų ir yra vienas pagrindinių orientyrų formuojant nacionalinę politiką. Institucinė šios politikos raida taip pat prasidėjo Sąjūdžio laikmetyje. 1989 metais, kai buvo įsteigtas tuo metu taip vadintas tautybių departamentas, pirmoji institucija koordinavusi tautinių mažumų klausimus pereinamuoju laikotarpiu. Vėliau ši institucija buvo pertvarkyta į regioninių problemų departamentą, 1997 metais į tautinių mažumų ir išeivijos departamentą, išplečiant tuo metu veiklos sritį ir įtraukiant ryšius su užsienyje gyvenančiais lietuviais. 2024 metais, lapkričio 7 dieną, Lietuvos Respublikos Seimas priėmė Lietuvos tautinių mažumų įstatymą. Jis nutraukė daugiau kaip 15 metų trukusį laikotarpį, kai Lietuvoje nebuvo specialaus tautinių mažumų politiką reglamentuojančių įstatymo. Labai džiugu šiandieną matyti, kad tarp mūsų yra teisingumo ministrė, buvusi teisingumo ministrė Evelina Dobrovolska, kuriai lyderiaujant ir prisiemant atsakomybę už šitą įstatymą, šitas įstatymas buvo priimtas. Mes visada liksime su didžiulė pagarba už jūsų lyderystę ir padarytą darbą, kurį padarėte tuo metu. Naujasis teisinis reguliavimas iš tiesų sustiprino teisinį aiškumą, apibrėžė pagrindinius principus ir sukūrė tvirtesnį pagrindą tolesnei šios politikos plėtrai. Kaip žinia, remiantis gyventojų surašymo duomenimis Lietuvoje gyvena 2,8 milijono gyventojų, iš kurių daugiau nei 430 tūkstančių, tai yra apie 15% save priskiria tautinėms mažumoms. Tai rodo, kad tautinė įvairovė Lietuvoje nėra siauras ar marginalus reiškinys, ji yra reikšminga mūsų visuomenės dalis. Tačiau vien nacionalinio lygmens statistika neatskleidžia visko. Tautinių mažumų pasiskirstimas Lietuvoje yra netolygus. Kai kuriuose savivaldybėse, regionuose tautinės bendruomenės sudaro santykinai nedidelę gyventojų dalį, o kitur, ypač Vilniaus regione, Šalčininkų, Trakų, Švenčionių rajonuose, Visagine ar Klaipėdoje, jos yra ypač ženkli vietos bendruomenių ir viešojo gyvenimo dalis. Todėl kalbėdami apie tautinių mažumų politiką visuomet turime matyti ne tik nacionalinį, bet ir vietos lygmenį. Šią įvairovę atspindi ir aktyvus pilietinis gyvenimas. Lietuvoje veikia apie 300 nevyriausybinių tautinių mažumų organizacijų, kurios puoselėja kalbas, kultūrą, tradicijas, vykdo švietimo, jaunimo ir bendruomeninės iniciatyvas. Šios organizacijos įgyvendino ir vis dar tebeįgyvendina tūkstančius renginių ir projektų. Šis organizacijų tinklas yra svarbus katalizatorius ir svarbus veiksnys, o to pačiu ir valstybės partneris stiprinant dialogą ir socialinę sanklaudą. Pastaraisiais metais, kaip žinia, Lietuvoje reikšmingai išaugo ir atvykusių užsieniečių skaičius, pirmiausia dėl karo Ukrainoje, taip pat dėl darbo ir studijų migracijos. Nors šie asmenys pagal įstatymą nėra laikomi tautinėmis mažumomis, tačiau jų integracija taip pat tampa vis svarbesnė viešosios politikos tema. Todėl Lietuvoje greta istoriškai susiformavusių tautinių bendruomenių matome ir naują įvairovės dimensiją, kuri kelia papildomų uždavinių švietimo, kalbos, socialinės integracijos ir visuomenės sanglaudos srityse. Tautinių mažumų politika ir užsieniečių politika, nors ir yra atskiros, tačiau turi sąlyčio taškų ir sinergijos, kurios negalime ignoruoti. 2015 metais atkurtas tautinių mažumų departamentas prie Lietuvos Respublikos vyriausybės dalyvauja tautinių mažumų politikos formavime ir yra pagrindinė valstybės institucija, kuri yra atsakinga už tautinių mažumų politikos įgyvendinimą Lietuvoje. Mūsų užduotis ne tik užtikrinti nuoseklų valstybės institucijų bendradarbiavimą, tarp institucinį bendradarbiavimą šioje srityje, bet ir palaikyti nuolatinį dialogą su tautinėmis bendruomenėmis, jų organizacijomis bei partneriais Lietuvoje ir užsienyje. Departamentas jau daug metų remia tautinių bendruomenių kultūrinės, švietimo ir pilietinio dalyvavimo iniciatyvas, vykdo situacijos stebėseną ir analizę ir stiprina būtent šią kryptį ir vektorių, koordinuoja tautinių mažumų tarybos veiklą bei prisideda prie sprendimų pagrįstų tiek teisinių reguliavimų, tiek realiais bendruomenių poreikiais. Pastaraisiais metais vis daugiau dėmesio skiriame socialiniai sanglaudai, visuomenės atsparumui ir aktyviam dalyvavimui viešajame gyvenime. Tai atspindi platesnę požiūrį į tautinių mažumų politiką kaip į sritį, kuri padeda stiprinti visuomenės tarpusavio pasitikėjimą, pilietinį įsitraukimą ir demokratinės valstybės darną. Mūsų tikslas, kad tautinių mažumų politika būtų ne tik įtvirtinta teisės aktuose, bet ir būtų matoma žmonių kasdienėje patirtyje. Mokyklose, savivaldybėse, bendruomenėse, viešajame gyvenime, tiesiog gatvėse ar įstaigose ar institucijose. Žvelgdami į ateitį matome, kad tautinių mažumų politika ir toliau turės prisitaikyti prie kintančios visuomenės poreikių, skaitmenizacija, migracijos procesai, geopolitiniai iššūkiai ir spartus informacinės erdvės pokyčiai kelia naujų klausimų ir naujų uždavinių, į kuriuos turime ieškoti atsakymus sutelktai visi kartu. Todėl vis svarbesnis tampa ne tik teisinis reguliavimas ar instituciniai sprendimai, bet ir gebėjimas kurti pasitikėjimų grįstą bendrą dialogą, stiprinti pilietinį dalyvavimą bei užtikrinti, kad kultūrinė įvairovė būtų suvokiama kaip visuomenės stiprybė ir bendras išteklius ateities raidai. Baigdamas norėčiau palinkėti, kad ši konferencija taptų ne tik akademinių įžvalgų, bet ir naujų partnerysčių ir praktinių idėjų erdvę, kad stiprintume tinklaveika. Esu įsitikinęs, kad skirtingų Europos valstybių patirtis leidžia mums geriau suprasti ne tik skirtumus, bet ir bendrus tikslus ir bendrus vektorius, kuriais mes judame. O bendras tikslas yra aiškus – kurti visuomenės, kuriuose žmogaus teisės, kultūrinė įvairovė ir pilietinis solidarumas vienas kitą papildo, o ne konkuruoja tarpusavyje. Linkiu visiems prasmingų diskusijų ir sėkmingo darbo. Dėkoju visiems uždėmesį.
Thank you very much for all the very interesting and encouraging presentations and greetings. I really hope that our conference will continue with really interesting presentations and discussions mainly. But before moving to the first session of our conference, I would like to start with something that we usually finish with, is thanking all the organizers. We are here in Mykolas Romeris University. However, this conference would never happen without a very generous support, first of all, of Embassy of the Republic of Poland, but also all the speakers, majority of the speakers are here, thanks to my colleague from the Central European Institute, Aleksandra Kuczyńska-Zonik, who will lead the next session. So without all the support and all the organizational issues, of course, also of Katarzyna Dzierżyńska would be very difficult to manage. So I hope all our cooperation will be really fruitful, and it will result in very interesting discussions, conclusions, and also maybe some guidelines how it's the best to proceed, what is already done and how is the best to proceed. So this is why I would like to move towards our first session and invite our speakers to change the places. Also, thank you very much. If you have time to stay with us for the sessions, it will be really nice. But of course, we also understand that it might be other agenda. Okay, so if I can now invite Aleksandra, and Aleksandra, the floor is yours. I will put only the names here.
Thank you very much, and of course, many greetings to Katarzyna, who is also responsible for helping, assisting in all this coordination and organization issues. So I would like to invite the speakers to the first panel. Barbara Aliaševičienė, who is Vice Minister of Justice of the Republic of Lithuania. Thank you very much for being with us. Professor Vassilis Petsinis from Corvinus University of Budapest from Hungary. Dr. Hanna Vasilevich from Institute for Minority Rights from Italy. And Professor Tomasz Wicharkiewicz from Adam Mickiewicz University from Poland. So we have got very diverse community here, and I would like to express my personal greetings for you, because I mean the guests in all panels, they are of course fantastic researchers and experts, but they are also my personal colleagues and friends. So I'm really happy to being here and have this inspiring discussion here. Yeah. So I would like to start from a very general perspective of protection on national minorities, especially in linguistic minorities, and that's I would like to ask the first question to Tomasz Wicharkiewicz, asking him to have a brief analysis of the best practices over minorities' languages. So what do you think, what are the best practices, best approaches, the most effective approaches towards minorities in Central Europe?
Okay.
If you have got a few slides, you can,
Yes.
but please be careful of our time.
Thank you. Thank you, Aleksandra. It's a great honor to be here. And I prepared a presentation on actually 2 case studies. So as the time is quite limited, the linguistic diversity is a political challenge, and actually the European policy on linguistic diversity involves many complex issues, recently also migration, borders, nation formation issues. European frameworks treat language as a matter of rights, participation, cultural identity, not just heritage. But this heritage issue is quite crucial as well. I'm a linguist, so for a sociolinguist, one of the most current issues is also the decline of minority languages. And well, this situation actually, this process of decline actually continues despite formal recognition and symbolic support. So sustainable minority language survival depends on institutional support and vibrant community practices beyond recognition. So I would like, in my very short presentation, I would like to focus on those aspects of top-down and bottom-up policies that actually fall beyond the system of strong legal protection. So we know Europe has established strong legal frameworks to protect minority and regional languages as valuable factors. In that respect, Central Eastern Europe is a very interesting case. I will skip the background, the discussion. So within the architecture of European minority language policy, we know about the 2 pillars, Framework Convention and European Charter on Regional Minority Languages. I think there will be more references today to those 2 documents. But actually, the issue, especially for less recognized or unrecognized language communities, is the quite weak process of monitoring mechanism. So lack of enforcement mechanism, symbolic compliance risks, slow monitoring cycles, and actually a lack of accountability or very weak evaluation to institutional and financial commitments. So as a case study reference to actually what works in top-down and bottom-up language policies for the revitalization of truly endangered languages, I have a very short presentation of 2 case studies. So actually Livonian in Latvia and Vymysorish in Polish town of Wilamowice. So actually 2 languages that have had no chance to use the European instruments for language protection. So Livonian in Latvia, actually because Latvia did not ratify the charter, and well, the language decline of Livonian due to economic marginalization, emigration, political upheaval, impact of the Soviet era, and very serious challenges on sustainability, lack of documentation, symbolic legitimacy that actually crossed the just the quantitative weakness of low numbers of speakers. So as a case study of a top-down revitalization strategy for Livonian, I would like to very shortly refer to the top-down policy of the Latvian state, which includes the official recognition of Livonians as the indigenous inhabitants, institutional support, very much action referring to public visibility and support, and the depoliticized cultural framing. So what lessons can be drawn from the Livonian case? Very much distinctive types between revitalization types. So Livonian shows that institutional revitalization can succeed even when fluent speaker numbers are extremely low. Partnership between academia and government have been crucial for securing Livonian presence in research and education. And for languages in terminal decline like Livonian, institutional sustainability is a realistic and meaningful revitalization objective beyond speaker numbers. The second case study with Mykolas is actually also quite a provocative case study, a tiny linguistic community which cannot use the tools for language protection because it's not recognized either by the Polish state, although recently efforts have been made to include it into the legislation on minorities and minority languages. Well, the amendment to the law was actually vetoed by the state president. So that's the case where grassroots, so bottom-up revitalization in the little town of Wilamowice, actually cultural initiatives, development of theater brings a revival despite weak state support. Wilamowice was founded in the 13th century by settlers from Western Europe. It was long regarded as one of the Germanic language islands, but actually the only one that survived the post-war, post-Second World War population changes.
Excuse me, Tomasz, can you go to the end?
Yes. So, okay, just to sum up with this comparative synthesis, both communities do not make use of the international instruments. The dynamic of revitalization is very much top-down in case of Livonian, while bottom-up in case of the Mykolas. The state attitude actually supportive in case of Latvia, historically hostile, all passive recently in the case of the Mykolas in Poland, institutionalization strong or limited, academia-state cooperation high, mostly independent, community mobilization moderate, extremely strong, symbolic prestige, growing nationally, primarily local. Long-term sustainability is stronger in case of Livonia, institutionally, socially dynamic, but fragile. So just to compare these two models of top-down and bottom-up policies. Livonian model benefits from some institutional support. Livonian faces severe demographic constraints. The Mykolas model shows exceptional community mobilization. The Mykolas lacks stable institutional backing, limiting resources and policy support, while effective revitalization combines legal framework, education, funding, and local community agency. So, these two cases were to show that actually there is a world of minority languages and minority language policies beyond the international and strong instruments. And this shows that actually without the commitment from both sides, top down and bottom up, no success in revitalization of such weak communities as the two case studies can happen.
Thank you, Tomasz. I hope that during the break there will be a time to discuss this topic, but now I would like to move to some cases we would like to discuss together. So I would like to ask Barbara Aliaševičienė, because you are totally involved in the works of ministry on new legal developments concerning national minorities. So I would like to ask you about these best practices, this effective mechanism you would like to introduce currently in the amendments law.
Thank you so much, Aleksandra. Thank you very much for the invitation. Taigi norėčiau labai trumpai ir glaustai pristatyti Teisingumo ministerijos šiuo metu vykdomas teisėkūros iniciatyvas. Tai visi žinom, kad 24 metų lapkričio 7 dieną buvo priimtas tautinių mažumų įstatymas, kaip jau minėjo gerbiamas direktorius, ačiū Teisingumo ministrei Evelinai už atliktą darbą. Bet kaip rodo gyvenimas ir kaip rodo praktika, šio įstatymo tik iš dalies buvo įgyvendinta Europos tarybos tautinių mažumų apsaugos pagrindų konvencija. Ir į 20-osios vyriausybės programos nuostatas buvo įrašyta ir ši nuostata, kad atlikus analizę tobulinti tautinių mažumų įstatymo nuostatas, siekiant visiškai įgyvendinti minėtą konvenciją. Tai čia iš tikrųjų noriu labai nuoširdžiai padėkoti už šitą analizę Katažinai Bogdzevič, daktarai Katažinai Bogdzevič, kuri padėjo mūsų ministerijoje, atliko tą analizę. Ir iš tikrųjų, Teisingumo ministrė siekdama įgyvendinti šitą vyriausybės nuostatą subūrė darbo grupę iš įvairių institucijų atstovų, tiek ministerijų, tiek mokslininkų, akademikų, tautinių mažumų atstovų, tam, kad visi kartu susitiktų ir diskutuotų dėl galimybių visiškai įgyvendinti konvencijos nuostatas ir dėl galimybių įgyvendinti Europos tarybos ministrų komiteto rekomendacijas Lietuvai. Tai iš tikrųjų darbo grupiai buvo pavesta iki birželio 1 dienos pateikti išvadas Teisingumo ministrei, ar yra poreikis tikslinti, tobulinti tautinių mažumų įstatymų nuostatas ir jeigu toks poreikis yra, pateikti siūlymus, kaip galėtų būti tobulinamos tautinių mažumų įstatymų nuostatos. Tai darbo grupėje iš tikrųjų buvo diskutuota dėl kelių pagrindinių tobulinimo krypčių, tai dėl aiškios galimybės kreiptis į viešo administravimo institucijas tautinės mažumos kalba. Taip pat buvo svarstyta dėl galimybės nustatyti vyriausybės pareigą patvirtinti vertinimo gaires, į kurias atsižvelgiant būtų sprendžiama dėl tradiciniais pripažintų topografinių užrašų nurodymo ir tautinės mažumos kalba. Taip pat siūloma sprendžiant dėl mokyklų, kuriuose ugdymas vykdomas tautinės mažumos kalba arba mokama tautinės mažumos kalbos, reorganizavimo, likvidavimo ar pertvarkymo, nustatyti pareigą gauti ministerijos arba vyriausybės lygių veikiančios komisijos pritarimą ir sudaryti sąlygas veiksmingesniam valstybinės kalbos, aišku, kaip antrosios kalbos mokymui. Ir svarstama patikslinti tautinių mažumų tarybos formavimo tvarką ir kitas procedūrinės nuostatas, užtikrinant aiškesnį proporcingą atstovavimą tautinėms mažumoms. Tai iš tikrųjų yra tos pagrindinės kryptis, dėl kurių buvo daugiausia diskutuojama darbo grupės posėdžiuose, dėl kurių sutarta, kad yra poreikis aptarti, įtraukti į tautinių mažumų įstatymo pakeitimo projekto. Tai darbo grupė yra užbaigusi savo darbą, yra pateikusi šiuos pagrindinius ir kitus pasiūlymus Teisingumo ministrei. Labai tikimės, kad vertinant šių dienų aktualijas, kad ši nuostata liks ir galimai 21-osios vyriausybės programos nuostatose. Ir jeigu liks, tai tikrai esam suplanavę rudenį teikti Seimui pakeitimo projektą. Ir taip pat norėtume pristatyti jums trumpai apie kitą mūsų rengiamą projektą, apie asmens vardo ir pavardės rašymo dokumentuose įstatymo projektą. Tai iš tikrųjų 22 metais įsigaliojo šitas įstatymas, kuris sudarė galimybę asmenvardžius dokumentuose rašyti lotyniškos abėcėlės rašmenimis be diakritinių ženklų. Ir įvertinus tai, kaip veikia šis įstatymas praktikoje, įvertinus tai, kad yra poreikis irgi tobulinti šitą įstatymą, Teisingumo ministerija parengė ir balandžio 13 dieną, šių metų balandžio 13 dieną pateikė derinimui projektą, kad būtų galima užrašyti su visais diakritiniais ženklais. Tai po viešo svarstymo iš tikrųjų gavome tiek teigiamų pastabų ir pritarimų, tiek neigiamų. Jeigu labai trumpai, tai labai džiugina, kad Valstybinė lietuvių kalbos komisija pritarė šitam projektui, nes Konstitucinis teismas dar 2023 metais konstatavo, kad būtent šita institucija turi profesinę kompetenciją ir turi specialių žinių teikti išvadą dėl galimybės rašyti lotyniško pagrindo rašmenimis su lietuvių kalbos abėcėlėje nesančiais diakritiniais ženklais. Tai labai džiaugiamės, kad gavom būtent šios institucijos teigiamą išvadą pritarimą. Taip pat džiugu, kad registrų centras jau įdiegė Unicode standarto UTF-8 koduotę, kuris sudaro techninės galimybės rašyti asmenvardžius civilinės būklės aktų įrašuose ir rašyti su visais diakritiniais ženklais, bet kadangi šitą koduotę naudoja labai daug institucijų, tai įvertinę šių institucijų gautas pastabas, kad galbūt ne visi spės pritaikyti ir taip greitai pritaikyti visas savo sistemas, jeigu teiktume, nes planuojame teikti rudenį šį projektą, tai buvo tiesiog numatyta, kad šio projekto įsigaliojimo data bus kitų metų Liepos 1. Bet aišku, na, kaip be šaukšto deguto medaus statiniai, tai gavom ir neigiamų pastabų. Kultūros ministerijos yra neigiama pastaba, valstybinės kalbos inspekcijos, valstybinio kalbos instituto. Tai iš tikrųjų šiuo metu ministerija yra parengusi pažymą, kodėl neatsižvelgiam į gautas neigiamas pastabas, kodėl manom, kad šis projektas yra labai svarbus. Ir irgi ruošiamės teikti šį įstatymo projektą rudenį. Tai tiek trumpai apie mūsų Teisingumo ministerijos vykdomas teisėkūrinės iniciatyvas tautinių mažumų srityje. Ačiū.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, especially for those who are directly involved and who are waiting for such amendments. And now I would like to ask the question to Hanna Vasilevich, because you have got experience on research on Ukraine, and we have known that Ukraine is aspiring to be a European Union member, and it means that several laws have to be been applied by this country. So, could you say, do you think that the new law in Ukraine on minorities can be a kind of new best practice for other post-Soviet countries in Eastern Europe, for example?
Thank you very much, Aleksandra. So I would begin with a small caveat. I wouldn't present Ukraine as the best perfect model for the minority protection. We all know that the country is in the state of war, so it imposes a lot of limitations on the country, and it's at the beginning a very long road for actually getting to the point. But what I would like to do shortly in my statement today is actually to identify 5 lessons that potentially could be useful and could inspire other countries from the region to look at, and also for the European community to see the potential, how the country, on the example of the country that facing so much hardship, actually providing us to look at. So one of the first important lessons, I think, it's concerns the political prioritization of the minority protection. For many years, minority rights in Ukraine existed in a very formal commitment. Ukraine has ratified the main Council of Europe and documents, instruments, including the Framework Convention and the European Charter, but at the same time, minority protection remained very fragmented across the different policies areas and very rarely treated as a strategic field of the governments. In many respects, this situation was similar to what found in the number of the post-Soviet states, where minority policies always mainly remains in the dispersed between education, language, culture, local administration without coherent framework bringing these elements together. What also important, I think, to look at the post-Soviet countries is that in many countries, minority rights are considered or put within this very folkloristic framework, which also limits, in a way, the minority rights. What changed after the 2022 in Ukraine was that it wasn't simply an adoption of the new law. Minority protection became a very visible political priority connected directly to Ukraine's European integration policies. And in my view, it's perhaps the most important language that we can learn from, or we can take from Ukraine, when the reforms become possible, when minority protections move from the margins of policymakers into the center of governmental attention. The second lesson, I think, would be important to look at is the role of the external conditionality. And here Ukraine demonstrates very clearly how European integration can function as the catalyst for the reforms. the prospect of the excess transform minority protection from the relatively secondary policy into the concrete benchmark linked to the accession process. And in many transitional states, minority-related reforms often were postponed, considered to be less important after some, I don't know, mostly economic aspects, and minority issues were not the top priority. I wouldn't remember any of the country where it would put the national minorities the top priority for the governments. And Ukraine illustrates that external conditionality can create incentives to address these issues that otherwise remain politically marginalized. I'm not suggesting, however, that these reforms should be externally imposed. I am looking from the perspective when the accession to the European Union became a very strong motivation, and that could also use to be a very useful tool for other countries, where we have, for example, Moldova also on the way of accessing European Union, but not putting that much of the efforts on this aspect. The third lesson concerns legislative modernization. We all know that most of the post-Soviet countries have their legislation related to the national minorities adopted in early 90s. Ukraine is not in the exception. And this law, despite at that time was rather modern and advanced, within 30 years needed amendments that nobody looked at. And with this motivation, external motivation conditionality, the new adoption of the new law, national minorities / communities, and this is important, and I will talk a little bit about this later, and the subsequent amendments represented the attempt to replace the outdated framework within the comprehensive approach to minority governance. We can also disagree that with the specific provisions or with the terminology introduced by the law creates a lot of problems. And here comes this community definition that it's very questionable. It's very unclear where it's coming from. It imposes quite a number of questions and limitations. But at the same time, the broader lesson remain very relevant, where many transitional states continue to rely on the legislative frameworks adopted during the early years of independence, and Ukraine actually demonstrates the importance of periodically revisiting and modernizing the legislation in light of the changing political and internal realities. The fourth lesson concerns consultation participation. As I mentioned at the beginning, in most of the post-Soviet countries, minority rights are rather limited to this folkloristic perception, where dancing, singing, and participating in big cultural events, basically this scope where minorities can be seen. So during the developments after 2022 in Ukraine, there were extensive consultation mechanisms introduced involving minority organizations, experts, civil society actors, international partners. And at the same time, I wouldn't idealize this mechanism because in many cases, participation remained reactive, not the agenda setting. So minority representatives were often invited to comment on something that the government has already developed, and they just wanted their opinion. And also there was also a time pressure and some limitations, and from the perspective of the national minorities themselves, where they saw that they need to promote the accession process as fast as possible. But at the same time, that was actually one of the rare cases where minority representatives were invited to comment on the reforms. They were rather structural, more visible, and more regular that never happened before. And it's also important because effective minority governance cannot solely rely on the legal guarantees. It also requires channels through which minorities can communicate their concerns, their problems, and engage with the public authorities. So I see that as the very important first step for improving the situation with the minority participation in Ukraine. Sure.
Thank you very much. So, so far we have elaborated Polish case, Latvian case, Lithuanian, Ukrainian, And then we are going further to Serbia. So my question for Vassilis Petsinis is, could you describe the situation of particular minority, Hungarian minority in Vojvodina, because you are expert on Balkan region. So can you share your experience or expertises on best practice toward those regions?
Thank you very much, Aleksandra. And yes, I could, but I would prefer to cover not just the case of the ethnic Hungarian minority in Vojvodina. Vojvodina is an autonomous province in the north of Serbia, one of the most multi-ethnic, richly multi-ethnic parts of southeastern Europe and Europe in general, inhabited by 26 recorded ethnic groups, including the Serbian national majority. So I would like to start with the positive aspects of the management of interethnic relations in Serbia, with a focus on Vojvodina. The major, just providing a brief historical overview, the positive developments, legal and institutional and political, were kickstarted in the early 2000s with when within the state union of Serbia and Montenegro, a new federal law for the protection of national minority rights was introduced, and it was drafted jointly by the authorities of the Serbian Montenegrin Federation back then, and consultants from the Council of Europe and the European Union. Later, when the state union of Serbia and Montenegro was terminated, certain aspects of certain components of this old federal law were incorporated into different national legal statutes for the management of interethnic relations and the protection of minority rights in Serbia. The most important document that one needs to concentrate on right now on the state level is the framework for the protection of national minority rights in Serbia, which was introduced in 2016. And there's here a certain specificity in the Serbian case, and specifically in Vojvodina, is that the adoption of these legal documents and measures on the republican level of Serbia, combined with the strengthening of the reinforcement of Vojvodina's autonomous and decentralized status within Serbia. In that, this means that certain provisions, for example, the provision for the function of the national minority councils in the framework document of 2016, combined with similar provisions in the autonomous statute of the autonomous province of Vojvodina, and this helps, this facilitates the management of interethnic relations, especially as far as areas such as education and signposting and public information on the regional and local levels across Vojvodina. For example, in ethnically diverse areas such as the north of the northern part of Vojvodina, northern Bačka, where there is a high concentration of an ethnic Hungarian minority along the Serbian-Hungarian border. Also, other cases, smaller minorities such as the Slovak minority in the area of Srem, the southwestern part of Vojvodina. Also, the case of the ethnic Croats, the ethnic Romanians along the border with Romania. Also, smaller groups such as the ethnic Macedonians, and so on. And the national minority councils is the major the major provision of the Serbian legal framework for the representation of minority rights, collective rights in for all major communities in Vojvodina and across Serbia. These are recognized as a pravno lice, which means legal subject in Serbia, and these national minority councils are represented at the autonomous assembly of the autonomous province of Vojvodina in Novi Sad, and also at the government of Serbia, the Serbian parliament, the Narodna skupština in Belgrade, and here the national minority councils are basically liaising with the provincial government in Vojvodina and also the Republican government in Belgrade for the management of interesting relations, especially regarding educational aspects or relations between ethnic minorities and their kin states. But here, and I would like also to expand further on this issue in the second question, that certain minorities in Serbia are endowed better than others in their in the promotion of their of the collective interest through the relevant provincial and Republican bodies of authority. I mean, a clear case is the case of the ethnic Hungarians, one of the largest registered minority groups in Serbia at the moment, represented by three political parties, but the major one, of course, is the alliance of Hungarians in Vojvodina, Savez Vojvođanskih Mađara, and also through their connection to both to the governments, to the Republican government in Serbia, and also taking advantage of the Hungarian status law and its provisions for ethnic Hungarian minorities in neighboring states, and also taking advantage of their high and compact territorial concentration in the northern part of Serbia. They are in a much better, they tick all the boxes for a more vibrant and more successful representation of their collective interests in comparison to smaller minority groups, for example, as I mentioned, the Slovaks or the Romanians or the Ruthenians in Vojvodina, which are numerically smaller communities, often facing the threat of conscious assimilation, or several cases emigration to their kin states, Romanians to Romania, Slovaks to Slovakia, also taking into consideration the fact that these states belong to the European Union, whereas Serbia has been stuck into a complicated limbo regarding their accession process, its accession process to the EU. So this pretty much summarizes the situation of the management of ethnic minorities in Serbia, with a primary sense of primary stress on Vojvodina, the most multi-ethnic part of Serbia, where I have, as Aleksandra mentioned, where I have conducted extensive research. So I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we slightly shift to the second round of questions, which also is connected with the first one, but I would like to ask you to focus more on this very complex geopolitical context of several tensions, war, globalization, migration, different challenges, which also influence the position of minority and the policies toward them. So I would like to ask you, how do you see this opportunity to navigate, successfully navigate, to provide successful, effective policy toward minorities in such complex circumstances? So the question for Tomasz as a first.
Okay. As you could see from my presentation, linguistic perspective or sociolinguistic perspective on diversity, minority languages might slightly differ from political or the perspective that actually adopts national or ethnic minority rights as the main concept. Just to remind you that actually Europe's and the world's linguistic diversity consisted of many varieties, smaller and bigger languages. Not all of them focused on the policies of respective languages spoken somehow in their kin states. So there's the linguistic reality, beyond all those instruments that actually transform the national or ethnic policies into language policies. Language policies might be not only different, but as we in sociolinguistics also stress, they have not only top-down character, but very often also the meso-level, and the most important, especially in the processes that we refer to as revitalization, language maintenance, revival, bottom-up or grassroots processes. For these processes, which are becoming more and more salient in the modern world, which also have to face processes of globalization, of migration, actually new frameworks, if possible, new legal frameworks should be created for such processes that are represented by the two case studies I discussed. Livonians, Irish, Karaim, Rusyns have no kin states. So the language policies directed to preservation or actually maintenance of the linguistic diversity, which incorporates such minor, very small, endangered, critically endangered, and or revitalized minor languages, must actually focus on multilingualism. So this is, in my opinion, a new keyword and key notion that should become, in many respects, the focus of some hybrid or new form of language policies. So not only national minorities with their kin state, where corpus planning for their languages is secured, so systematically neither Polish, nor Ukrainian, nor Lithuanian, nor Latvian are not endangered. But there's this world of minor languages where also corpus system, the very system of the language is already on the verge of extinction. How to provide not only top-down instruments, but also mechanisms and support, goodwill, good emotions, and also, I would say, political or socio-political empathy that would support this full range of multilingualisms across Europe and the world.
Thank you very much. I mean, thank you for this positive recommendation at the very end of your presentation. But yeah, the question which appears when I was listening to you, it is how to balance, I mean, this multilingual policy and integration and cohesion. So the question for Barbara is, what do you think? I mean, based on your Lithuanian case, how to balance such strategies, multilingualism, multiculturalism on the one hand, and the second thing, integration of society.
Thank you for your question. Iš tikrųjų, aš manau, kad visų pirma, valstybei nereikia bijoti tautinių mažumų. Nereikia bijoti tautinių mažumų. Mes irgi esam piliečiai, mes irgi mylim Lietuvą, mes esam lojalūs, mes mokam mokesčius ir labai svarbu suprasti, kad tai nėra grėsmė valstybei ir valstybė, kuri yra įvairialypė, kuri turi daug tautinių mažumų, yra stipresnė. Ir dabar, kai turim tokią, iš tikrųjų sudėtingą situaciją, tiek geopolitinė prasme, tiek visi kariniai konfliktai, iš tikrųjų labai apmaudu, kad, tarkim, susitinka mūsų užsienio reikalų ministrai arba prezidentai ir vietoj to, kad kalbėtų apie šitos tikrai svarbesnius, manyčiau, šitoj situacijoje nacionalinio saugumo prioritetus, turi spręsti šitos klausimus, kurias galima išspręsti paprasčiau. Tai mes matom tą politinę valią numatyti tam tikras nuostatas vyriausybės programoje. Ministerijos ir kitos institucijos rengia teisės aktų projektus. Mes irgi esam tas pavyzdys, Teisingumo ministerija nuolat yra tas pavyzdys, kuris rengia teisės aktų projektus tautinių mažumų srityje. Mes juos pateikėm Seimui. Iš pradžių teikėm vyriausybei, paskui pateikėm Seimui ir sakyčiau, kad galbūt reikėtų daugiau politinės valios pritarti šitiems projektams. Ir tada atsirastų galbūt daugiau laiko kalbėti apie teigiamus dalykus ir pasidžiaugti vieni kitais. Tai galbūt taip labai trumpai neišsiplečiant, nereikia bijoti tautinių mažumų, mes dėl to esam tik stipresni. Ir labai linkiu daugiau tos politinės valios, ne tik pradedant, ne tik leidžiant pradėti rengti šitos projektus, svarstyti šitos klausimus, bet ir turėti drąsos balsuoti teigiamai iš tos projektus. Tai linkiu šito visiems mums ir visai Europai tikrai. Ačiū, Aleksandra.
Thank you very much. I would like to pay your attention to other issues, which is kin state, because kin state we sometimes may also play a huge role in relation between majority and minority and can influence the policy towards minority in the country. So the question for Vassilis is, what do you think, based on the example of Hungarian minority in Serbia, do you think that it's a kind of tension between Hungary and Serbia, or do you think that Hungary can somehow help or assist minorities in this country, in Serbia, to empower minority, its own minority in different country?
Well, thank you very much, Aleksandra. But first of all, before providing my question, you're all aware that Hungary since mid-April has a very fresh government, and we have not yet seen how they're planning to manage relations with ethnic Hungarian political partners in the neighboring states. So what happens is just provide very quickly the legal framework. In 2016, the Hungarian government introduced the Prosperity package for the provision of support to ethnic Hungarian minorities in neighboring states, regarding especially educational, cultural, and entrepreneurial activities. And the main, speaking specifically of Serbia, the main recipient of this support, or coordinator of this external support, was the Hungarian National Minority Council, and by extension the Alliance of Hungarians in Vojvodina, the main political party representing collective interests of Hungarian minority in Serbia. And since the 2000s, all these ethnic Hungarian parties, they have been trying to compete for support from the government in Budapest. For example, during the 2000s, you had the Alliance of Hungarians in Vojvodina and the Democratic Community of Hungarians in Vojvodina, who were one party was the Democratic Community was allied mostly with right-wing parties. Whereas the Alliance of Hungarians in Vojvodina at that time, they were leaning more towards the socialists. Now, later, with the consolidation of Fidesz for 16 years in Hungary, all ethnic Hungarian parties in neighboring states, Serbia, Romania, and Slovakia, tried to become partner-like institutions to Fidesz, also up to the extent that they even replicated much of Fidesz's national conservative ideological platform, even considering areas that do not really have to do with the management of inter-ethnic relations. For example, the leadership of the Alliance of Ethnic Hungarians in Vojvodina spoke a lot against the promotion of gender ideology and LGBT rights, against the war party in Brussels, and aspects that and other policy making areas that do not have any direct relation to the management of ethnic relations and the promotion of minority of the collective interests of Hungarian minority in Serbia. It is a rather complicated state of affairs because what you mentioned about kin state empowering the minority in a neighboring state, it very much becomes entangled and complicated here by political factors, political and ideological factors. But I think that there is going to be a pragmatic settlement that I suppose that the leadership of the Alliance of Hungarians in Vojvodina, who openly supported Fidesz in the latest elections, they must feel a little bit uncomfortable right now. But there must be some. If I can make a rough guess, a rough prediction, there will have to be some kind of a pragmatic modus vivendi between the leadership of the ethnic Hungarian party in Vojvodina and the new government in Budapest under Peter Magyar for the coordination of this support to this material support to the ethnic Hungarian minority in Serbia, which is vital for the activities of the Hungarian minority in Vojvodina. And now, when it comes to another question is whether the positive relations between Budapest and Belgrade will had been enforced during the during Viktor Orban's term in office, who maintained close connections with Aleksandr Vučić. Whether Peter Magyar will continue this tradition also remains to be seen, and it is not only subject to the situation of the ethnic Hungarian minority, but also larger economic projects and also cross-border cooperation between Serbia and Hungary, not only regarding minority rights. So this remains to be seen.
Yes, thank you very much. We are expected some developments, I hope, because of the new government. So the last question to Hanna, and the same question because this Ukraine specific case of the country involved in war. So do you think that some mechanism can be productive, can be effective, even though the country is involved in such conflict?
Thank you, Aleksandra. So first of all, we need to see a very strong link between the start of the war and the accession process and the fact that this process is extremely speeded up. We haven't seen a country before that was so supported, that was given so much hand and support from the European community, not only during the course of the war, but also through the accession process. So I think this is one of the most vital and essential questions. But if we look from the perspective how Ukraine has managed to handle the situation with the national minority during the war, I would say that it is important to keep in mind that we usually, when we are discussing the minority protection during the armed conflict, we are often assumed that the main challenge is to preserve the minority rights under these difficult circumstances. But at the same time, as we see in the situation with the war in Ukraine, the situation and attitude to the national minority significantly changed. It's being brought to totally different framework through the different perspective. First of all, minority protection became directly connected to the EU accession. That means that it also becomes a part of the democratization, all the reforms on a different level. So it's not some national minority protection itself. It's being embedded and connected to all other aspects. The second is that it was the first step, the first requirements to meet for Ukraine to proceed with the negotiations. That means that it was widely discussed and the very close attention has been paid to that. And also it's clearly has moved from the margins of the policymakers to the central and important political process. So if we're talking about lessons, and this is how you try to frame this panel, I was trying to think and identify three lessons. So the first one would be that the wartime resilience is not necessarily about the preserving this the pre-war status quo, but it changes the minority rights. The second one is the internationalization of minority rights. That means that it's the most significant development after 2022 was that minority protection increasingly moved beyond from the domestic sphere. And as I mentioned, it became the important topic for negotiations in the relations with the kin state that we spoke a lot about. We all remember all these discussions between Romania and Hungary, and hopefully the situation with Hungary has been resolved right now. But we also see the interest of the country to deal with this, because before there was a clear stand that minority rights is secured within the domestic domain. So it's the state to decide what to do and how to deal with the national minorities. Now we see that in the case of Ukraine, because it's very much linked with the accession, there is an open door for negotiations and more discussions about this topic. We're not trying to see, because like as Vassilis discussed, that Hungary had a very strange, if we put it in a nice way, governments, and there were lots of questions about it, but still Ukraine showed the motivation to address and to discuss it with this even strange partner at the time. Also, the third observation that I have is concerned with the proceduralization of minority protection. That means that accession process creates a strong incentive for visible reforms. So if before minorities were just informed about something has been changed, nowadays, as I discussed before, there are lots of discussions, a lot of consultations, and minority get to talk about it. As I mentioned before, but I didn't get the chance to talk a little bit about the introduction of the new terminology of the community to the law on national minorities was also preserved, as if the government actually heard the claims and demand from the minorities themselves, because for decades, having very Sovietized heritage from, and I think this is very typical for most of the post-Soviet countries, minority definition or minority term was preserved as diminishing and deteriorating for the minority. Therefore, the Ukrainian government said that maybe we should move to the communities to show the equal approach. We're not discussing how from the legal perspective it works or doesn't work and what are the limitations related to that. But at least it showed that at least there is the attempt to hear some claims and demands and the attempts to integrate them into the legislation. So I think despite all the limitations that Ukraine has right now, we have something to learn from them.
Thank you very much. So we ended. You have just ended this part of our panel. So I would like to start the Q&A session. So all questions to the panelists, to our guests, are welcome. So please think a while for the question, and maybe some of you would like to have a short remark to other panelists said. So maybe you would like to comment or add, because I know that it is my role to, to sometimes to limit your time, to limit your presentation because of time. So there is a small opportunity to add something or to comment. And of course, maybe some of you have got a question for the panelists. Okay, so Agata.
Hello, thank you very much for a very interesting question for Ola and for your answer. I have a question for Professor Petsinis. I'm sorry if I malpronounce your surname. It was very interesting for me to listen about the protection and the legal aspects of the minority, Hungarian minority in Serbia. But I would like to ask you about your thoughts, or maybe you can comment on the situation in Hungary, of course, during the Orban governments when he was in power, because as you said, we don't know what will be the politics of new prime minister. Do you think that there is the same commitment in protecting the law of minorities in Hungary as it is in the politics of Orban concerning the Hungarian living abroad?
Thank you for your question. This is always a very topical question because what happens is that since the 1990s, well, first of all, just to highlight that post-Trianon Hungary is a very ethnically homogeneous society. There are ethnic minorities that are being represented also by national minority councils in a comparable way as in the legal framework in Serbia and Croatia. And the largest ethnic minority group is the ethnic Germans. And there are also a smaller minorities such as Slovaks, Croatians, and Serbs. Also newer minority groups such as the Greeks who came after the civil war in the 1940s. And since the 1990s, a series of Hungarian governments, especially the more right-wing governments, they would they would invest on an articulates a platform for the effective management of inter-ethnic relations in Hungary in order to use it as a good practice, which they would like to, from their perspective, they would like also to be applied for the ethnic Hungarian minorities in Romania and Slovakia and oops. Oh.
Is it something we should be afraid about? No, it's just a weather alert. Yes, weather alert that there will be a strong rain, but we have this in the forecast for several days already. So we are safe here. We can safely continue. The rain will not follow on our heads. Everything is inside the building. So
yeah,
we had different alerts some time ago, but we still are in the best place even to be for those other alerts.
And then just to mention that there were some cases, for example, during Viktor Orban's term in office, especially during the last 10 years or so, the leaderships of these national minority councils, no matter if we're talking about the German Minority Council or the Serbian or even the Roma Minority Council, they were often been accused of trying to maintain a clientelistic partnership with Fidesz in order to receive favorable conditions and funding from the ruling party. So again, it became the formal institutional and the informal aspect of management of inter-ethnic relations in Hungary became entangled in a very peculiar way. Overall, now it remains to be seen what is going to happen, because as it happened during Viktor Orban's term in office, he tried to, and as part of this illiberal democracy project that Fidesz has been promoting, they tried to build bridges with more, at least superficially, like-minded leaderships in the neighborhood of Hungary. One example was the case of President Vučić of Serbia. Then, to a secondary extent, Prime Minister Robert Fico of Slovakia. So, with Romania, it always was kind of complicated. So now it remains to be seen how it is. This is a big question mark for me. What strategy is Peter Magyar going to follow vis-a-vis the ethnic Hungarian minority party leaderships in neighboring states?
Yeah, thank you very much for your response. When I was thinking about this, I think that for Viktor Orban was very important the votes from the minorities, from the Hungarians living abroad. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that was also his like in his agenda. And when I was analyzing the last national holiday, the Trianon, I think that Magyar, in some way, he will continue the Orban politics. I am speaking from the perspective of politics of memory, and there was some similarities.
I think here will be similar. Yeah. That will be because also this is, if you read the party program of TISA, there is a continuity in this respect, and also before Viktor Orban in Josef Andal, another right-wing Hungarian politicians, would follow the same rhetoric, and now and also Fidesz was the preponderant political party among ethnic Hungarians in neighboring states with the right to vote in Hungary. In Vojvodina, for example, in 2016, 90% of Vojvodinian Hungarians with the right to vote in Hungary voted for Fidesz. Now we have to wait and see what is going to happen. I mean, whether are they going to switch towards TISA for purely pragmatic interests, or is there going to be some internal reshuffling, because especially the alliance of Hungarians in Vojvodina, they took a strongly pro-Fidesz stance during the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would not like to monopolize the discussion.
Yeah, so we are waiting for the other questions, if they are, and a small remark from Tomasz. Yeah.
Yes, it's well, again, from a perspective of a sociolinguist, I would like just to, because it's very interesting to see the perspective, socio-political perspective, but I would like to somehow stress that for a linguist, for a sociolinguist, the issue of minority language rights is very much focused on those, as I said, not only top-down mechanism, but also bottom-up, in which respect the issue of kin state in language policies might very often lead to the perception of reciprocity and politics of reciprocity, which in case of languages of communities spoken by communities without kin state, then leaves them in some sociolinguistic and sociopolitical vacuum. So, well, I really appreciate that slightly different perspective that includes language communities without kin state into general concept of language rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, when I can ask you for some, because you mentioned the case of Poland and very small community of Wilamowice. Oh, sorry. But we have got another minority in Silesia, which is not recognized by the government. So have you got...
No. The government did their best to recognize it. The president vetoed.
Okay. So it is the process of recognition. But what do you think? What are the how to manage such numerous community which demand their rights, they require rights, but currently, I mean, there is a kind of gap for them.
It's a question to me. So again, from a linguistic or sociolinguistic perspective, of course, the number, the quantitative aspect of the community does matter. But for the linguistic system, it's really not important what we preserve or what we want to make an element, living element of linguistic diversity, whether it is a system, a language variety spoken, I don't know, but by 500 or by 5 million inhabitants. But language rights in that respect, in respect of right to developing, preserving, maintaining, and transmitting their own language is actually the same. And again, in the case of Silesian, also the role of bottom-up plus meso-level, regional level. So in such a centralized country as Poland is, but still the power, the judicial opportunity, not only cultural, let's say cultural opportunities on the regional level make Silesian, which is still not recognized, actually one of the paradoxically and contradictorily strongest linguistic communities in Poland. So much is being done for the sake of Silesian by the Silesian themselves that actually, well, it's not a question of language rights, but this is a very vivid developing language and revitalizing language system.
So we can sum up that it is also the necessity to for minority itself to be active and develop for their own. So not the country.
The
but
top-down rights that will not provide any actual vitality to language itself.
Okay, so
Hanna wanted to say.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. If I may, I have a question to Barbara. You presented a very interesting case when the newly adopted legislation after a very long period of time is looked to be updated and a lot of interest put into that. Can you elaborate a little bit on the motivation from the side of the state? Why? First of all, there was a very long gap in the minority, lacking minority framework in Lithuania, and why after 2022, 2023, basically, there is this very growing interest to this direction.
Tai yra toks, žinot, įdomus klausimas, aš prieš istorijas nežinau, nes atėjau tik į tos kadencijos politiką, į tos kadencijos vyriausybę, bet Lenkų bendruomenė visą tą laikotarpį nuolat sakė, kad yra labai svarbu ir įstatymas, ir labai svarbu ir tautinių mažumų teisės. Ir mes visur apie tai kalbėdavom ir būdavo netgi tokių pavyzdžių, kad susitikdavo delegacijos Lenkijos ir Lietuvos ir buvo pažadai, kad štai Seimas balsuos, priimsim įstatymą, išvažiuodavo delegacija ir vėl nebuvo priimami tai įstatymai. Tai čia matyt gal galėtų daugiau netgi papasakoti Evelina, ką reikėjo paaukoti dėl to, kad būtų priimtas šis įstatymo projektas. Užkulisiuose mes girdėjom ministerijoje, kad tai yra tiesiog dėrybos krauju, ašarom ir tu eini aukoji kažkokį galbūt vieną įstatymo projektą, tarkim, nežinau, baudžiamosios teisės srities, jeigu mes kalbam apie mūsų ministeriją. Ir tariesi ir dėriesi su visais politikais, kad, žiūrėkit, čia mes tada nusileidžiam, bet mes labai norim šitoj srity, šito įstatymo projekto. Tai yra, tokie savotiški kartais politiniai žaidimai, kartais dėrybos. Ir labai svarbu, kai yra palaikymas ir pritarimas kitų Seimo narių, tai mes puikiai suprantam, kad ir dabar Teisingumo ministerija galbūt nesurinks to pritarimo ar tos daugumos ir gali būti, kad, tarkim, Seimo nariai nebalsuos už. Ir tokia situacija yra galima. Ir tada vylėmės, kad atsiras galbūt pavienių Seimo narių, kurie sutiks šitą projektą pateikti ne nuo ministerijos, o nuo Seimo narių. Tai yra visokių tų politinių būdų. Liūdna, kad reikia jų ieškoti ir manipuliuoti ir kažką aukotis ir dėrėtis, nes atrodo, tokie paprasti klausimai reikalingi ir tikrai nekelintis grėsmės valstybei, bet metų turi dėl eiti, kovoti ir kalbinėti, įrodinėti, kad mes esam svarbus. Bet taip labai svarbu, ką sakėt, kad tautinė mažuma turi būti aktyvi. Tautinė mažuma turi nuolat veikti, stengtis, kovoti, sakyti, kad reikia, kad yra svarbu, nenuleisti rankų entąjį kartą, kai nepavyksta. Taip, tai yra, kol kas mums vienas žingsnis pavyko, Evelinos vadovaujamai ministerijai, Evelinos tuometiniam Seimui pavyko balsuoti už tą įstatymą, bet aišku, mes matėm, koks jis buvo, kai buvo rengiamas projektas. Jame buvo žymiai daugiau nuostatų ir netgi tų, dėl kurių mes dabar padarėm darbo grupę ir norėtume įtraukti vėl, papildomai ištraukti iš stalčius ir bandyti. Tai taip, įstatymas irgi buvo, savotiškai galim sakyti, išoperuotas dėl tam tikrų dalių ir nuostatų. Ir daug, kas žinot, klausia, ar vertėjo priimti tokį įstatymą. Sumažinta, ten atsisakius tų nuostatų. Tai ir gerai, kad vis dėlto buvo priimtas. Aš manau, kad gerai, nes tai buvo pirmas žingsnis ir visada yra geriau ir lengviau taisyti ir tobulinti, negu neturėti iš viso nieko. Tai, tokia būtų mano asmeninė pozicija ir atsakymas, kodėl tiek metų užtruko, ką reikėjo paaukoti ir verta aukoti, manau, kad tikrai verta, tikrai nesustoti.
Okay, thank you very much. So once more, we need active minority, smart leaders, and open-minded government. So thank you very much for this panel, and we can continue discussion during the break. So thank you very much for your attention.